This is Keys to the Shop, Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Jasmine Diedrich Wilson, owner of Diedrich Espresso. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and welcome to this Founder Friday for June. I'm really excited to share this with you today because this is the first time that we're talking with somebody who's the owner of Drive-Thrus, exclusively owner of Drive-Thrus. And our conversation with Jasmine Diedrich Wilson today is going to talk about some of the unique challenges and the benefits to running this type of operation. And we're going to dive into her story in this, and it's going to be really fascinating. I think you're really going to love this one. Now, today's episode, of course, is brought to you by the wonderful people over at Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the best specialty coffee equipment suppliers on the planet. They curate the best equipment from around the world, and they fit it perfectly with the needs of both their professional and enthusiast customers. So you could just want to open a coffee bar in your house, or you own a coffee bar and you want commercial equipment that is of the highest caliber, sourced with expertise and with support as well. And this is why you should look to Prima Coffee. Basically, helping you succeed in making great coffee is what drives them. To find out more information, go to their fantastic website, prima-coffee.com. There you're going to find a wide selection of the best equipment, and you're also going to find a lot of resources that help you learn about how to use that equipment properly. So again, that's prima-coffee.com. If you're looking for the best equipment and expert assistance to go along with it, Prima Coffee is where you should turn. prima-coffee.com. Let them know Keys to the Shop sent you. And thank you so much, Prima, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Now, this episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. This is the line of plant-based performance beverages that are designed specifically for and alongside of professional baristas. Professional baristas have very strict standards for what they want to serve their customers, and so Pacific, knowing this, developed these products with the professional feedback of the global barista community. It's why these products are so amazing. It doesn't matter if you're using the almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk that they have. Its ability to take the heat from steaming and produce an unmatched, silky texture and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee, these are the things that make it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. Pacific is dedicated to the support of the barista and coffee community globally. These products are just a testimony to that fact. And I would encourage you, go to pacificfoods.com. Learn more about the Barista Series line of plant-based performance beverages. Get them in your shop, try them out, and see how they can elevate the non-dairy offerings you give your customers. Thank you so much, Pacific, for your support of Keys to the Shop. Okay, everyone, so we are going to be diving into the world of drive-thrus through the story of Jasmine Diedrich Wilson. Jasmine opened Diedrich Espresso when she was just 19 years old. She's owned it for 8 years. It's an all-women owned and run organization. Started with just 2 locations and has now grown to 16 drive-thrus. Jasmine has experienced enormous success with this, and she's also an inspiration in business as she is the chair for the Economic Alliance of Snohomish County Ambassadors. She sits on the board for the American Cancer Society. She is a finalist also for Emerging Leaders Award in Snohomish County 2 years in a row and is now a judge on the panel for that award. Jasmine is just a business dynamo, and in this conversation, you're going to get a sense for the kind of drive she has, no pun intended, but definitely is an inspirational figure for business, and the way that she goes about, delegation and management and leading the organization now is definitely something that I think we all can learn from, and it's something that's in contrast to the way things started out with the company. And we get to hear all about the ups and downs, the challenges, and the victories. This is a really great story, and it's also laced with a lot of great lessons for operating a successful drive-thru in the process. So a lot to learn from Jasmine in this conversation, and she certainly brings a lot of wisdom to the table here. So let's pull up to the window here and get some inspiration from today's Founder Friday guest, Jasmine Diedrich Wilson. Well, Jasmine, thank you so much for joining us on Keys to the Shop. I'm excited to talk to you today.
I'm super excited too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you about the concept of drive-thrus because there is somewhat of a, I don't want to call it like a war between the two concepts. Like a lot of people have, there's strong opinions about to drive through or not to drive through, right? And your experiences as a successful business owner with this concept is really fascinating. And I really am excited to dive into some of the experiences you've had and the wisdom you have in doing this successfully and answering some of the differences between the two models as well. But I want to start by just kind of asking how you yourself got into working in coffee and in particular became an owner of coffee drive-thrus as opposed to like a brick and mortar store.
Definitely. So I graduated high school in a small town up north, and then I went to Washington State University, go Cougs. My husband went there as well, but we didn't meet till a few years after. And then about 6 months through college, I realized that the cubicle life was not the life for me. I lived in a sorority. When we went around the room and all talked about what we wanted to do when we grew up, they wanted to all be stay-at-home moms. And I, as well, would love to be a stay-at-home mom, but I want to be a stay-at-home mom with money. And so that was the driving force. That was the driving force behind opening my business. I wanted the flexibility to be home with my future children, but I also wanted to make sure that I could support myself because my dad said either marry rich or make sure that you make your own money. And so I didn't want to have to deal with marrying rich. So I made sure that I set myself up for success. So after I dropped out of college, I lived on my dad's couch for about 6 months, and he said, you have to do something. And I realized that, Dad, you had $100,000 set aside for my education at the university, so why don't you reinvest that in a company for me? And so then I went and I was actually looking at Subway to begin with. I felt that a franchise would help lead me through being a small business owner versus getting thrown in a pond with no life jacket. And so I contacted the local Subway and said, how do I do this? And so then I contacted Subway corporate and there was nothing for sale. So then I said, well, what do I enjoy doing? And I realized that I loved being a barista at a cafe in college. And then when I come home from college, I was a barista in a drive-thru espresso stand in the west side of Washington. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I said, this is something I can do for the rest of my life. So I went on Craigslist and looked for what I could find as far as businesses that are for sale. And I found a bundle deal for 2 espresso stands. And I thought, I want to be a larger company, so why not start with 2 instead of 1?
Nice. So that road to getting your vision for what you wanted to do, like you worked in coffee and you remembered that you really loved it. What did you love about it that made you want to make that your career, what you were doing?
Right. So it was the most enjoyable job I had ever had. I really loved building customer relationships and finding out about people. I really enjoyed sociology in school. So, learning about so many different people that you wouldn't have met before was super interesting to me. And making coffee is fun. I couldn't imagine a more fun job. You get to sit in a warm little stand and you're complimented and told you're pretty all day and you make good money. So what else could you want from a job?
So it was sort of the environment of the coffee stand in particular that was attractive. Like I personally feel like the small environment of a coffee stand in a drive-thru is really cool because you've got all the things at your disposal and there's not like a huge place to clean up afterwards or prep beforehand. And it seems doable to do 2 of those because 2 drive-thrus kind of seems like one large coffee shop. And if you're going to start by buying a coffee shop, like doing 2 at once, that seems really awesome. It's such a great thing that you had that you were able to start off there. And it must have been a lot of pressure too, because you're talking about a lot of money invested into a business. And that's once you purchase those coffee shops, that money's gone permanently. So, I mean, did you feel the pressure? Like, this is all the money that my parents had set aside for me. Like, I've got to make this work. Like, what was that like?
Well, being 19, I did not feel that pressure because my priorities were elsewhere. Seeing that, looking back now, I don't know if I would have given my 19-year-old that kind of money to buy a business, and I don't think I was necessarily in the right mindset to have bought a business. There was often times where there was frustration coming from my dad, and he said, you need to do this more, you need to put more effort in, you're screwing off with your friends, and like this needs to be the most important thing to you. I think if I did it all over again, I would probably wait till I was 23 or 24. Saying that, I would not be where I am today if I had waited. But looking back now as a 27-year-old, and now I personally have invested quite a bit of money into my business because now I have 16 locations. Yes, I feel the pressure now more than ever, even though I'm doing better now than I was 8 years ago.
Indeed. So what was the turning point for you where you actually got it together for the business sake and for your own sake?
I think it's when I hit 8 stands, and 8 stands was a turning point for me because before that, I managed all of my locations and all of my employees, and at 8 stands, it was too much for me. And so when it actually became too much for me and it wasn't as fun anymore, that I think was a big reality check, and that was in 2013. And so that was a reality check for me. My priorities had also changed at that point. Partying wasn't the number one. I really started looking forward to the future and saying, what do I want my future to look like? So I said, I want to buy a house in 5 years, and I want to find a husband, and I want to have kids. And so what do I need to do to change my current life to make it go towards that direction?
So you started making plans to change the things you did on a daily basis to affect who you wanted to be and where you wanted to be years from that point. So when you have 8 stands and you're kind of pre-epiphany, what kind of things were you doing in the managing of your shops that once you decided, like, you know what, I really need to manage these differently, or, what I'm doing right now is not really helping the shops. Did that decision to really set those long-term goals and get more serious about things really change the culture and success of the shops that you already had?
Definitely. That was the time that I decided that I needed managers. And so at that time, I chose the strongest barista in each location and chose to pay her more and give her some of the responsibilities that I was holding on my back. And so that was the turning point. And then last year in 2018, I reached another turning point. Again, looking into the future, I said, okay, I'm going to have kids in 2 to 3 years here. I can't put in the effort that I'm putting in now continuously, indefinitely. And so I chose to choose an upper management team to help me manage the managers. And that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And so I have a district manager and a district lead, and they take a lot of the responsibility off my back. And they go around to every location weekly and give me a report on it. And it's been such a great, venture. Like, originally I was some stupid kid. I got pulled into the stand drama. I was friends with all of the girls, and that makes it so difficult when you're friends with your employees, drinking after work, and you have friendship drama and work drama. People don't respect you. It was already hard because I was 19 to, 23. Most of my employees were older than me, so they already had a lack of respect for me because of my age and because my dad bought me my first coffee stands. And so it's been very difficult to manage up till now, but we have changed so much, especially in the last 3 years. We have come so far from what we once were. And, even just, I think, I'm 27 now, and, from 23 to 25, I really came into my maturity as a human. And so, not letting things get under my skin, or not letting, employees know how I was feeling necessarily when it was unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if someone says something catty to you, it's not professional to say something catty back. Saying that, when I was young, I didn't think about it that way. I was like, well, she's being a brat. I'm going to be a brat back. And, that's just not how it works in the professional world. And so I think, learning to bite my tongue, learning how to deal with employees correctly, were all huge steps in making my company what it is today.
So when you mentioned the problems of kind of being a peer with the employees, but also the owner, and the kind of entanglement that problems that causes to happen, one of the things you mentioned was there was a problem with the way people perceived you because your father had bought you a business.
Right.
And that is not unique for a lot of people. They have family money, be it family money that is saved up, or sometimes a relative leaves money in a will and they want to reinvest it. But it's sometimes looked on in a way that people discredit you. And I'd imagine that would be one of the things that people were doing. What was that like, and how did that pan out in terms of overcoming that professionally?
It was difficult. It was especially difficult at first. It's gotten easier throughout the years. Now I just roll my eyes when people say, oh, well, her daddy gave her the money to start it, and so because at first that was what it was. And my dad did give me the money, and I hadn't worked to get that money. He had worked his entire lifetime to get that money for me. And so, it's also easier to disregard your company and disregard, all of that when you didn't have to work for it. But now being 8 years in, I worked so hard, tooth and nail, to make this company work. And I've reinvested so much of my own money into it that that's what I just laugh when people say something about how my daddy bought me my first business, or he floated me for a couple of years because I wasn't making money. They're jealous. Like that's unfortunate for them, but the hard work that I put into the company is really what has made the company, not the money. Anybody can get a large chunk of money and buy a business, but that doesn't make it successful.
Well, we call those loans,
Right.
A lot of people go, with family, sometimes even you have to pay that back. But we all, at some point, most people, unless you're independently wealthy, are going to be taking loans out. And it's what you do with that opportunity. And it sounds like even though you had sort of a rough start in terms of leading the company and all that, you've been able to look back on those things and learn from your mistakes. And obviously we all sort of start in a place where 10 years later we're looking back at our former selves going, no, I don't believe that was
definitely
me. And I'm sorry to all of you who had to deal with that that version of me.
Oh, definitely. And that's something else I try to do now is, I have a lot of younger employees because a lot of young women want to work in a coffee stand. And so I have employees ranging age 15, 16 to 55. And so when my young employees make mistakes or they choose to, walk out because they didn't get Paradiso weekend off, which is like a summer music festival here, I try to take a step back, take a breath, and then think back to, Jasmine, when you were 20, what was your mindset? Where did you put and I owned a company, and so I can imagine just having a job and having, making that my priority. So I try to think back to what my mindset was at the time and remember that and say, okay, well, this is their mindset. So be aware of that. Mm-hmm. And, it was really difficult because at first I built myself a bad reputation, and I was deserving of a bad reputation because I didn't handle things as I should have. I listened to employees about things that people had done with businesses before I bought them and followed the employee's lead instead of what I knew was right. And it shot me in the foot. It really did. I had a lot of issues in my first couple of years, employee relations, treating employees respectfully, employees treating me respectfully. And so it's hard when I had those negative times to come away from that. And, and it's hard to rebuild a reputation after that because you still have people that was their only time with me. And, they only know me as that person, as that young woman who made mistakes. And now I've grown so much as a person that I wish I could say, look at me now, but they never will. And that's okay. And, and they don't need to, but, I definitely have built a good reputation up at this point, and I'm very proud of where I am today.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad you're talking about building and growing in that way, because so many of us, we just want to change overnight, but it takes a long time, especially if you've made a lot of mistakes, and we all have. But currently, though, you have a crop of employees in your 16 stores that just know you as who you are today. For the most part, imagine. You have
right.
an opportunity to build the company. As it grows, it takes on a different type of feel. The culture is always going to shift based on the fact that new people are going in, and people who are still there are changing. So I want to dive into a little bit about what you do to maintain a good culture in your locations, given that there are so many of them and the crews are so small compared to a normal store. What's your ideal situation for culture, like the way employees experience your company, and how do you maintain that throughout the organization?
Great. So it's really picking good staff in high places. And so I can say for the first time in a long time, I am finally so happy with my management staff. There's always, one or two people that I thought would be a good fit for the position. But then, once, they're in the position, they either are, mean or talk down to their employees because this is the first time that they've had, power in a workplace. And then what do? Do you let them go? Do you try to correct it? Do you just let them move forward? And so I've learned to try to correct those things, saying that some people are just mean, and it's hard because there's only so many employees, and there's only so many employees that can do a manager's job. And so, like I said, I am finally in a good place where I am so happy with all of my managers. And I think that when we have good managers who get along, it really helps the staff, and they choose good staff. And so, because all of my managers hire and interview for themselves. And so that is huge. Just picking the right people to put in charge and making sure the people are in charge are a good influence on the company.
So they are the generators of the culture. And imagine that each store kind of has its own feel. Is that accurate?
Oh, definitely. It really, like I said, it really depends on the manager. And so, and also the location. We have stands in Everett, which here is a pretty large city, probably the largest city in Snohomish County. And we have, there's lots of businesses, and there's a downtown, and there's things like that. And then we have stands. We have a stand out in Oak Harbor, which has an Air Force base. And so out in Oak Harbor, they're very military driven. And then we have a stand in Burlington, which kind of is a more mom and pop feel. And so it's really, it depends on the customer base, where the girls grew up and where they're from, and just their personalities in general. And, we have 16 managers, I guess. And, working with them and finding out their strengths and weaknesses and how they work and how to communicate with them, and then passing that on and making sure that they communicate with their employees how those employees need to be communicated with is so important. Learning, well, do they work better, telling them, or work better showing them? And so it's all about communication, and, communication is hard when you live so far apart. Thank God for technology, because I cannot imagine doing this 30 years ago without cell phones.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But just, in setting a precedent. And so that's one thing that we've really worked, in the last 2 years, especially since I've gone to upper management, to help me out with some of the things that I make these plans and things I want to do, but then I'm so busy with day-to-day activities that I may not be able to implement these plans. And so that's something that my upper management has really helped me with, is that they can take the time and write a training manual for me. They can take the time and write, a list of expectations. And so we now have manager meetings every 2 months, which has been huge. And so just making sure that all of the employees company-wide know those expectations and fulfill them and hold them accountable has been huge.
I want to ask you this, just going with this thought of, having lots of help in creating these the culture in the shop, and it sounds like it's just tailored to their clientele as well as the staff, which is awesome, because you could easily sort of top down strong arm people into just the feel is this, the look is this, we say these things. That's your prerogative. You could do that as the owner.
Right.
And the fact that you allow it to be somewhat organic is great. And obviously, it's been successful for you. And hospitality is a huge part of that. And also, hospitality is a sticking point for a lot of folks with the drive-through model. And it's something that I've thought is like, how do you go about giving somebody a really hospitable experience in a drive-through versus a cafe where you have the face-to-face and you have a little bit more time with them? It feels somewhat mysterious to me, and I wonder if you could shed some light on that. Like, what do you do to really lean into the hospitality to create an experience for people in a setting that's sort of known for being real quick? Right.
And so that was one of the things that I enjoyed working in a drive-through instead of a cafe, was that people are in and out, and it was really nice. And so to me, this is kind of a funny question, because to me, I work in the stand 2 days a week still. I've been in the stand for 8 years now, but to begin with, my first few years, I was working open to closes just to make ends meet, and now I'm lucky enough to only be in the espresso stand 2 days a week. And so, like I said, this question is kind of funny to me, because we see our customers, 3 to 10 minutes every day, depending on how many drinks they get and depending on who's in line. But we see most of our customers, we see every single day. And so I see my customers more often than I see my mom, and my mom lives 10 minutes away from me. And so I think that it was, it's kind of funny to me, because I have built such huge, lasting, important relationships with some of these people. I see them more than my coworkers and my employees. I invited 2 of my customers to my wedding, and I've been invited to birthday parties and baby showers, and people share, things from their parents dying to, going through fertility issues and finally becoming pregnant to, oh my gosh, I'm cheating on my husband. They tell us everything from A to Z, and we wear a lot of hats as baristas. We don't only make your coffee. We're therapists. We're a best friend when needed. We're a shoulder to cry on. And even in those 3 to 5 minutes, I think it's almost easier to see them every day in those minutes and build a relationship with them over time like that, instead of having, them for an hour in a cafe. And, you help them with their coffee, you check on them, get them water. But I think that, building it over a long period of time and incrementally is better, because in between the times you see them, they do something and you do something, and you can share your experiences instead of having to, sit with them for an hour and talk to them, and, and then long periods between the times you see them. And so I thought this question was kind of humorous to me, because, none of my baristas have issues building super long-lasting relationships with all of our customers. And I've gotten, more spaces for Christmas. I've gotten bottles of wine. I've gotten all kinds of things, because these people really value what we bring to the table.
Wow. As you're talking about that, I was considering the idea of what we do in the brick and mortar style coffee shop, and the in and out of the customer is it's not really that much longer when you consider the queue in the morning, and it just goes down and you pass people through the line. It doesn't necessarily equal better hospitality. It sounds somewhat similar, as just more space to deal with in that moment. And so I love that your experience with hospitality in a drive-thru is something that's just so dynamic, and that your staff are tuned into that. That's definitely something that you would be looking for in a hiring process, because I imagine that it's not always been like every person you hire is tuned into that wavelength, right? Like, there are probably people who use the drive-thru to check out. Like, this is easy. I only need to see you when you pick up your coffee, and then, be gone with you.
Yeah, and so I think hiring a cafe and hiring an espresso stand are definitely very, similar. And so It's funny because when back in the day, I had a list of questions and I went down a list of questions. I got the answers. I wrote the answers down. I asked them to make a coffee if they had coffee experience, and I sent them on their way. Now my interviews are so fluid in comparison. I have a list of questions. I rarely look at them. I have a couple key points that I make sure I ask, like, do you have any priorities before work? What are your strengths and weaknesses? And those things are important as far as hiring them, but strengths and weaknesses would be an important thing for me once they are hired. And how do you communicate? Things like that. Those are all questions I definitely ask in an interview. But the more important part to me in an interview is making sure that they can talk, that they're relatable, that they're comfortable talking to a stranger. If someone comes in, they're super fidgety and, they're uncomfortable talking to you in an interview, then they probably aren't going to be comfortable talking to a customer or a stranger. And so to me, I can teach anybody to make coffee. I can teach, most people to follow policy and clean, but it's really the natural outgoingness in people that I'm looking for. So, if they're relaxed, if they can talk to you, if they, if you throw a random question at them and they just pull it, out of nowhere, if they can talk to you comfortably, those are the people I'm looking for over someone who can make a perfect white chocolate Americano.
Now, what about speed? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and that is exactly the type of thing that you want for anyone working in the service industry, to be honest. Whether it's somebody in a restaurant or a cafe, it seems like you're going to have to be somebody who really knows how to handle yourself when doing multiple things at once to keep the line flowing, because you could lose customers just by the fact that the line of cars is too long.
Oh yeah, definitely. And therein lies, the big difference in between cafes and drive-thrus is we are definitely a get them in, get them out. We only have grab and go food. We don't sit there and we don't make biscuits and gravy. We don't have a huge options as far as our menu goes. We personally have quite a few options, but it's grab and go. So either you throw it in the microwave, you throw it in the toaster, and you send it out the door. So those are the options. And so we definitely see this an issue sometimes. And so we try to pick, the best baristas, not the best baristas, the fastest baristas for the morning. And once I have a number, and once the location hits the number in a certain shift, I add a second person. And so that's been huge as well as, adding a second person to these shifts, making sure that the customers come first. And, just getting them in and out quickly. But then in a cafe, you have so much more time because people actually come in, they plan on sitting down. And so they have time to make specialty coffee. They have time to do pour overs. They have time, to spend 15 minutes making you a sandwich. But that's not, something we have at the espresso stand. Saying that, I prefer that. I prefer to get them in and out and, see them tomorrow, and more customers means more money.
Sure. And they prefer that too, because that's why they're there.
Right?
They have an expectation if they come to a coffee shop, there's a little bit more, well, one would hope there's a little bit more patience in the process, but you're delivering on their expectation of going in and out, right? So that's going to make them happier, and it'll make you happier. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on your staffing process for that, because that's a huge, whether you're adding a coffee drive-through to your shop or you're just going to run a drive-through, staffing it to make sure that you can handle that business is a huge question mark for people. So you mentioned a number, and I wonder if you'd be willing to share with us a little bit about what your high water mark is before you're like, okay, well, we need another employee on. What's kind of the math behind what you do in terms of staffing? Definitely.
So, like I said, we put, all of the managers work the morning shift. They get to pick their own schedule, and everybody likes Monday through Friday, get off by noon. Who wouldn't like that shift? Yes, they have to wake up a little earlier, but you can still go home and take a nap after your shift and still be off before most people are off work. And so you have time to enjoy the day. And then we have managers in our stands, and we have lead baristas in our stands, and they're under the managers, and their job is to help the manager, help, everything along with it, make sure that they're, they have special ordering that they do while the manager does the majority of the ordering. And so between those two baristas, they're usually the most experienced and fastest and, friendliest baristas of the staff in the stands. And so, Our number is $550 before noon. If they're doing $550 before noon, that means they're pretty constant, at least throughout, some of the hours. And so we have POS systems, so I'm able to go look and see, okay, they're having, a customer every 3 minutes at this point in the day. Oh, they slowed down here. And so I look at the numbers throughout the morning and say, okay, if there's a customer every 5 minutes, you need a second girl there so that they, we can get the customers out, because I would prefer to pay a second person than make a customer wait.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In your number right now must be different than what it was before as your business has expanded and to its offerings, maybe based on the average sale per transaction. Like, as that number gets higher, imagine it gets more complicated. The barista's job gets a little bit harder, so therefore they can do more, they can offer more, but they can actually do less in that 1 minute than they used to be able to do. Does that factor in?
Yeah, it definitely does. And, I was going to speak about that later too, is, prices are going up. My price of products are going up. Everything's going up. So obviously our prices are increasing as well. And I think the biggest thing is people come in for usually one drink in the morning. And, the morning shifts are 2 to 3 times as busy as the afternoon shifts. And so people come in for one drink on average in the morning because they're alone and they're driving to work. And so the big key is to also sell them a food item. That almost doubles what you would make off their drink, or sometimes, more than doubles what you would make off their drink. So selling food, having them stop for coffee and breakfast is definitely a big seller.
Mm. Yeah. So that's sort of like the menu logic we're hearing so far. And the end of this discussion about staffing, which is brilliant, and that's, you have to have this logic behind what you do with your people, because the people that you put on staff to staff the cafe, that's money right there. And if you just want to have it look comfortable and have people's job be super easy all the time, then you might lose a lot of money if you're not strategic and have numbers to back up your decisions. But we're talking also about what your menu needs in terms of staffing. And you have these grab and go items as far as food. You have the coffee. Let's talk a little bit more about what makes sense for you. It sounds like those are the main things. Like, when it comes to the menu of a drive-thru, there might be some distinct differences between that and a cafe menu. I wonder if you can elaborate on the differences between the two models and what's ideal in terms of what you offer in the shops.
Definitely. And so, as I mentioned before, some of the things in a cafe is that you can have a full kitchen and you can, make all these different foods. And so we're on the other side of that is we have barely any space. The stand that I work in, my sink is in a drawer. So, we're trying to make the most out of a small space. And so we do a lot of research for our menus. I definitely go and do market research to start with. I go and shamelessly check my competitors' menus and their pricing to make sure that I'm in the realm of where I should be. And then I also look at Starbucks, and check their pricing. And I try to come in between the two, because as a larger company, we have a lot of costs that, a singular coffee stand wouldn't have, because I can't work in all of my locations 30 to 40 to 50 hours a week, while a lot of other espresso stand owners, they work full time in their locations. And so that is a bigger cost to myself. I think, we can compare our menus pretty closely with cafes, except that, they have a more vast menu. For example, Narrative Coffee, which is a specialty coffee cafe. I go there actually for all my business meetings. And they're very specialty in their cafe. And so they are able to carry all these amazing foods and make you biscuit sandwiches. And, I go there all of the time, at least twice a week. I'm in his coffee house. And so they have so many options that we just can't keep up with. They carry 2 different types of coffee a day, and they put those on rotation so that you can try all different kinds of coffee from all over the world. We have a singular coffee. It is Diedrich Espresso roasted by Cafe d'Arte. And so, that's our option. We have one, and so they're just very different. They're different feels. Everything about them is different. But I used to raise my menu prices every 2 to 3 years, but with everything going up so quickly now, I have taken on the Starbucks model of raising my prices yearly. From 2011 to 2020, minimum wage in Washington will have gone up 38%. So from when I started till next year. And then most of my prices, my products, they've gone up 30 to 45%, but I've only been able to raise my prices 13% since I first started. And so it's a difficult thing, you know, and people still complain about the prices, even just raising them a little bit incrementally each year. And so it's a difficult thing to balance. It really, really is.
So while it's a restricted menu, it's still, there's so much strategy involved because it has to make sense for the environment. It has to be fast enough to, you know, satisfy the same types of cravings that people have in a cafe for sweet, savory, you know, things like that. But it also has to make financial sense for you because it can't be so esoteric that it just loses you money because, you know, throughout your 16 stores, it would just compound times that number and you'd be out of a lot of money.
Definitely. And well, and that's one thing that, you know, at times is a hard pill to swallow for me is that any full-time employee in any given location makes more per month out of that location than I do. And so that's a hard pill to swallow for me. You know, I put up the original front money. I have all the risk. If I go under, they go get a new job. Yeah, it's probably frustrating for them, especially if they've been with the company for a long time, but it would be world crushing for me. And so it is. It's hard to find a healthy balance. I mean, I had someone today come in and if you just order a basic drink like a latte or a vanilla latte or a white chocolate mocha or even a quad shot white chocolate mocha, the drinks really aren't that expensive. But when you start adding, you know, caramel, extra sweet, breve, you know, white coffee, when you start adding all of these things in, the drinks do get very expensive, especially now we have a CBD option. And so you buy a little bottle and you put it in yourself and it can get expensive. And so people are upset and it's a hard thing because, you know, I agree. All people should be paid a living wage as a minimum wage. Saying that, people need to be prepared to pay $9 for a cup of coffee or, you know, $30 for, you know, going out to dinner somewhere. And so it's a really difficult balance to, you know, make everybody happy and keep your customers and do all these things, but still make a profit.
Yeah, that making people happy, make everybody happy. That's sort of the unrealistic expectation that every service professional or operator has in mind, but is also true that you can't do that, you know. And that usually it seems like it. Maybe this is the case with yourself, that when you're in the midst of having to raise your prices, the thing that gets you over the hump is the idea that, well, you're going to always have somebody that has a problem with what it is you're doing in some way. And if you run your business based on their desires and, you know, the fact that they can't see as much of the whole picture as you can, then you probably would go under.
Right. Well, I have one uncle who just actually sold Diedrich Coffee Roasters. And then my other uncle is down in Southern California, and for a long time he owned Diedrich Coffee. And then now he no longer owns that, and now he owns Coffee, which is 2 cafes down there, and they do super well. They do wonderfully down there. He makes more out of 2 cafes than I do out of 16 locations. So wow. He's doing wonderfully for himself. That's one of the reasons I didn't originally want to get into coffee, because I didn't want to step into everybody else's footsteps. I wanted to break away and do my own thing. But you know, he told me one thing, you can deviate from anything else, but one thing you cannot deviate from is the price.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to kind of go back to an earlier answer you gave to the question about hospitality, talking about the relationships that you've developed over this time and all of those very like the emotional connections, the vision for your shop, and all of those things that we look at and want to have happen in our establishments are fueled by and supported by the fact that the price is the price, or the hard work that it takes to set up systems to create consistency and all of that stuff. So they're both inseparable.
I agree.
I want to segue into something that is hard for anybody running a business like a coffee business, a retail coffee business, and that's location. And for you, you've got all of these drive-thrus. What goes into selecting a location for a drive-thru? Like, what is the criteria where you say, this is it? It must be slightly different, but not too different than searching for the right place to open a regular coffee shop.
Right. And so, over the years, I've opened and sold and closed, easily over 20 locations, and location. It's literally, just like they say it is. And so, I personally have only opened 3 locations ground up. They found a stand. It was closed. I contacted the landlord, and it has never worked out for me well. And so I have shied away from that completely, saying that, if something good looks, or, if there's a coffee stand that's closed that looks interesting, I would not hesitate to try it out again. But, overall, I've bought locations that are already existing locations. Saying that, most of the locations that I've bought have not been successful when I acquired them. And so, that was definitely my bread and butter in the original years. As I bought my first 2 locations, they did okay. They didn't do great, but they did okay. And then my next location was completely failing, losing like $6,000 to $8,000 a month, but it was I knew it had potential. I knew I could make it fly. And so,
why did you know that it had potential? What made that one different than the ones before that you thought, well, I'm not going to touch this, but this one you're like, oh, this is one that definitely has potential? What's the difference?
Well, and sometimes I'm wrong with that because, for example, last year I bought 2 failing locations. Both of them were losing money, $6,000, $8,000, $12,000 a month. They were bleeding money. The owners just had to get rid of them, and I had full faith in both of them. They're both on busy roads. They both had potential as far as turning a very ugly building into a beautiful one. And so I bought them both, within 2 months of each other. And in December, I sold one because it just never came through. And so I was mistaken. I take risks and sometimes they don't pay off. And so, making sure that they're on a busy road, that, they have great, curbside appeal, that they're beautiful stands from the outside, because if you look successful, you'll be successful. And so, competition's also huge. So my Everett locations, they kind of hit a cap. I don't think that they're ever going to do any better than they're doing currently. I don't think they're going to do any worse than they're doing currently, but they won't grow like some of my other locations. I have one location and it grew 10% last year. And then I have other locations and it grows how much we've raised prices. And so it's really hard because, sometimes you take a risk and it doesn't pan out, and sometimes you take a risk and it does really well. But making sure that you have good traffic flow, that you have an easy in and out, that's always huge, because I've bought locations in the past before I was aware of this, and people are like, wow, it's really difficult to get into from the road. And I was like, crap, I didn't even think about that. I was like, oh, the parking lot's great. Another thing I look for as far as the drive-thru is that they have enough room to back up so that we can fit 6 cars behind the window. So if we have, a 6-car pileup, we can take that in our parking lot, because I've seen stands and they only have, room for 2 cars or 3 cars. So that 4th car, if it drives by, it's just going to keep driving because there's nowhere for them to go. And let's see and like I said, competition, my Everett stands, they're never going to do better than they do currently, because every block there's an espresso stand. So if you make a customer angry, if your line is too long, so many things can go into losing customers when there's another stand just 1 block away, versus I have stands that, they have almost no competition. And so those stands obviously do very well. And I always thought, you need to be in the city to make money. But then I bought my 3rd stand it was right smack dab in the middle of neighborhoods. There was nothing else around, and, not even many businesses around. And so I was like, I don't know if this is going to go well, but I have to get out of Everett. And so, but it did well, and it panned out, and we had a great backup, place, and it was doing $60 a day when I bought it. And by the time I lost my lease a few years later, but by the time I lost my lease on it, we were doing, $600 a day. So it's all about, putting the hard work in and making sure that it's a good looking stand, making sure you have quality product, making sure that you have, good equipment that doesn't break down, that you have good employees that will provide a superior experience. All those things play into it.
So taking risks, obviously, that's a part of business. And of course, I know that what you're sharing now is going to help people mitigate some of that risk, but not totally eliminate it. When you look at other people opening coffee stands, what kind of mistakes do you see them making that are the most common mistakes that you think, based on your experience, could be avoided or should be avoided?
Well, I think the number one mistake of any new business owner is they think, oh, this is going to be so easy. The employees will take care of it. I'll have so much time off. I'm going to have a flexible schedule. It's going to be easy sailing and great. All I have to do is invest the money. And that is so wrong. I work around my employees' schedules. And for the first 3 years, I did not have a single day off. I worked 7 days a week for 3 years. I didn't get a full week vacation until I was in it for 6 years. And so I think that is the thing that kills businesses fastest, is that they don't realize how much hard work and effort you have to put into a business to make sure it's successful. I still work 60-hour weeks every week. I work 7 days a week currently, 8 years in. And I do a lot of things outside of the box too. And so I think that's something else, is that I personally find community partnerships so important. I'm part of Rotary. I'm the ambassador chair of the Economic Alliance in Snohomish County, and I work with the American Cancer Society. I sit on the board there. And so to me, community relationships are huge, because why own a business if you can't give back to your community? And I think that we talked about reputation earlier too. And so I think that has helped a lot, building my reputation back and having people actually see the person I actually am instead of the person I once was. And so I just think, not knowing how much work it's going to take and not choosing community partners are the huge mistakes people make.
What would you say to somebody who says, hey, Jasmine, I want to open a coffee drive-through? What are the top 3 things maybe that you would tell me that would set me on the road to success?
A lot of people reach out to me super often about opening coffee stands, and I try to support and give as much advice as I can. My original thing I tell to everybody is, if you value your next 5 years, do not open a business. If you are starting a family, if you're, if you have any priorities that come before this business, it's not a good time for you. I concentrated so highly on this. I did not have a healthy relationship. I did not have time for friends. I was, upset at times that I had to invest my money back into my business instead of being able to buy a nice car like my friends did, or, get my nails done all the time, or have as nice of clothes. I wore clothes from Value Village at points because I would rather reinvest in my company than buy nice things. I slept on an air mattress on my floor for months before I bought a bed because it was more important to me to grow my business. And so I have no loans out. I have paid cash for everything since day one because I don't want to ever get over my head something that, I can't pay off. And so I've always just paid cash. So location, curbside appeal, hard work, a good quality staff who believes in your vision. I think that's super important. Someone that's on your side. That I think has been the biggest issue with staff, is people that don't agree with how you're doing things or don't see the purpose in it. You have to have a staff that agrees with you and that, challenges you. Like my upper management, for example, I often ask them, I'm like, I think I should do it this way, but what do you guys think? Do you guys think I'm out of line by saying this? So I throw ideas off them. And adaptability, I think, is huge too. And so when I buy an espresso stand, I look at everything exactly how they're doing it and say, are they doing anything better than how we're doing it now? And I think that a lot of business owners, especially ones that acquire other businesses, don't go into it with, an open mind. They say, okay, well, that's how they did it. This is how we do it now. And so I'm always looking for new innovative ideas, new products, new anything I can get my hands on that will make my business better. And I'm completely open-minded to changing anything that we're doing to make it a better place. And so I think all of those things are super important.
Jasmine, thank you so much for all of this. It's just been really fascinating and eye-opening. I'm excited to see the kind of success that you've seen over the years, and the story that you've told about how you've developed as a leader, I think, is inspiring as well. So thank you for joining us on the show. How can we stay in touch with what you're doing and learn more about your business and even, drive-through one day?
Definitely. So we're located in 3 counties in Washington State right now: Snohomish County, Skagit County, and Island County, and we're ever growing. We're always looking for new locations. I think I'll probably cap it at 25, but we'll see how I feel then. The best ways to get a hold of us would be on Facebook, and we have each individual stand has a page so that they can show who's working, what we're doing in that stand, the daily specials, things like that. And so it would be Diedrich Espresso, for example. The one in Snohomish would be Diedrich Espresso Snohomish on Bickford on Facebook. And then we have 2 Instagram pages, one for North County, one for South County. And so it would be at Diedrich Espresso South County or Diedrich Espresso North County. Come check us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Jasmine. This has really been fantastic. And it was such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much. It was an honor that you reached out to me. I was so flattered. I was like, yes, this is the coolest thing. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, I so appreciate the transparency and the vulnerability that Jasmine displays here in this conversation, talking about how things started versus where things are now. And it's so encouraging to see the kind of heart that is behind this organization and what they're doing for their community, for their staff. And it's also so fantastic that we got to learn some practical insights into operating a successful drive-through, such a unique way to give hospitality to your community. And certainly Diedrich Espresso is accomplishing that in spades. So thank you, Jasmine, for being on the show, for sharing a bit of your life story with us. And if any of us are in the area, definitely we need to swing through and experience Diedrich Espresso for ourselves. So if you want to learn more about Diedrich Espresso, it's as simple as visiting their website at diedrichespresso.com. Now, if you want to reach out to me, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. That's the email where you can give me your questions, comments, feedback, or you can start a conversation about working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help you take your business and your operations to the next level. Definitely love hearing from all of you, and that is the email to do so, chris@keystotheshop.com. Or you could message me on Instagram as well. I encourage you to follow the Instagram account, Keys to the Shop. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me on the show again for this fantastic Founder Friday. And I hope you have an amazing week. And of course, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.